Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Marques. I'm the President and CEO of the Rideau Hall Foundation. I'm so pleased to be joining you here today, celebrating CanadaHelps' 20th anniversary and hosting this afternoon's conversation from my home in Ottawa on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, on whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. I'm very lucky to be joined today by four incredible leaders from across Canada to talk about cultivating an innovation mindset, how to do that in the midst of a global pandemic, and how we can help to future-proof our organizations. After I engage with these four in conversation for a little bit, we'll turn it over to the audience for a Q&A. So joining me here today is Sara, a world-class champion for children with more than 20 years of global and Canadian experience. As the founder and CEO of Children First Canada, she leads a national movement to make Canada the best place in the world for kids to grow up. Sara's joining us from Calgary. Gideon Arthurs is CEO of the National Theatre School of Canada, the only institution in the country entirely devoted to providing professional training in all theatre disciplines in both official languages under one roof. Gideon's joining us from Montreal. Rebecca Bisson and Karen Aglukark in their bubble are leaders at the Northern Youth Abroad and Arctic Inspiration Prize winners for their project, Northern Compass. Rebecca is Executive Director of Northern Youth Abroad. Building on her background in working with youth, program development, and organizational management, Northern Youth Abroad has provided the perfect environment for her to play a meaningful role in a small organization with big plans and a huge heart. Karen Aglukark is from Arviat Nunavut. She has been involved with Northern Youth Abroad for over a decade and is a co-team lead of Northern Compass. Over the years, Karen has worked as a youth coordinator, research and policy analyst, program coordinator, and participant achievement coach. Karen plans to pursue graduate studies in clinical psychology and to return to Nunavut to provide much needed mental health services. Finally, Ikem Opara. Ikem has spent the last 20 years engaging public and private sector partners in Canada, Tanzania, Kenya, and Cuba. Ikem most recently led the Ontario Trillium Foundation's strategy, grant making, and capacity building work with a focus on inclusion and improved outcomes for Black and Indigenous youth. I'm delighted to say that he is now the Director of National Learning Partnerships at the Rideau Hall Foundation. So he's my colleague, and I'm very fortunate that he joined our team. So let's get started, and to get started in a really honest way. I think it's fair to say that this past year has been pretty brutal. It's been a year of changes we didn't anticipate, really in crises in every facet of life, how we live, play, work, how we serve our communities, wherever they may be. Frankly, a big part of me just wants to have a nap, and I think we'll discuss that too. How do you innovate when the world is so tired? The optimist in me, however, believes that crisis can be a catalyst for innovation, inviting us to look at the world differently and to seek out new opportunities as we problem solve. And what a year of problems to be solved. According to our friends at Imagine Canada, 78% of charities have increased innovation and experimentation over the past year. So I'm going to start us off with kind of a roundtable rapid fire question for everyone, really kind of begging the question of what we mean by innovation. So that's where I'd like to begin. What does innovation mean to your organization? Is it a term that's overly used, that's lost meaning? Does it need to be demystified? So I'll turn to Sara first. Go ahead, Sara.
Oh, Sara, I muted myself. Thanks, Teresa, for hosting this conversation, and to CanadaHelps for bringing us together. I think, what can be often quite intimidating to people when you think about innovation is, this idea of getting out of our comfort zone and trying new things. And so I think, one of the most critical aspects of this is, staying open to new ways of working and being comfortable, getting comfortable being uncomfortable, because it naturally takes you beyond what you're used to doing, and getting into more of an experimental way of thinking and trying new things and being open to failure and picking up and trying over again. So I think it's more of a way of thinking that just changes the way that we begin to do our work together.
Innovation as a mindset. I love it. Beck and Karen, how about you? What does innovation mean for Northern Youth Abroad and for Northern Compass?
Yeah, well, we're in the intersection of an organization that's been around for 23 years and a project that had been around for 23 days. And so the two needed very different approaches. And so I think in some ways Northern Compass really benefited from the shift and the change up at that time and did require a lot of innovation, but there wasn't a lot on the ground to begin with. Our business is experiential education. And so we had to ask the question, how do you offer that in a time that is devoid of experience?
Yep. And in terms of innovation for the program in general, we really had the benefit of taking Northern Compass, which is brand new, trying all of our new services that we could offer youth and incorporating what we were learning from that into Northern Youth Abroad. So it's taking, you know, different parts of whatever program or business you're working in and seeing, does this new method work? And if it works there, where else can I try this?
Where else could it be applied? That intersection is amazing. We're going to get to it a little bit more in detail. Ikem, how about you? What does innovation mean for our team?
Well, I would say innovation, it has to become part of the fabric of everything that we do. We're having a lot of conversations right now about how we build back better, how we change, how we go further together. I think innovation has got to be the sort of an underpinning of all of the relationships that we enter into and how we think about what the future can look like if we actually do follow through on co-creating it and co-creating in a way that addresses some of the challenges we've had in the past.
Thank you. And Gideon, lastly.
Innovation's become a bit of a swear word in the theater world right now. It's a business that has been eradicated. It was eradicated overnight. There are no theater productions that can happen across the country. And so the notion that we would simply innovate our way out of this problem has become really problematic. But what I would say for the National Theatre School, and we certainly responded quickly to the crisis, was not so much innovation as going back to the essential quality of what we did, is really rethinking what was important and pursuing that. And that was the innovation. And I would say the innovation for us has been in authenticity, in care, in patience, and less in the kind of catchy ways we used to think about innovation as radical integrations of technology or the latest thing.
Exactly. I think innovation is sometimes just, you know, finding new ways of doing the same old things in addition to new things as we're having to do. I think for many of us, especially in the charitable sector, innovation is probably too often equated with digital transformation. We'll get to the ways in which innovation is so much broader than technology adaptation. But it does seem clear at the same time that embracing digital and virtual ways of working and serving our communities really is now the requirement for survival. So our next question for Sara and then for Gideon around digital transformation. Sara, it's been a big year for Children First Canada. Tell us about what this new virtual reality has meant over the past year, and particularly how it impacted your planning around the first National Child Day in 2020.
Well, it certainly has been an exciting and very challenging year for us. Children First Canada is a national child advocacy organization, and we've just marked our 5th anniversary. So we're still, you know, a bit of a baby, a toddler, if you will, in the charitable community. But I think something that aided us as we went into this crisis is that we were already a virtual organization. Our staff are located across the country. We have always worked in this way, and so we did not have to deal with the challenges that many other organizations were facing of having to close down offices, relocate staff. That we had already overcome that challenge, and for us it was so that freed us up to be able to seize the opportunities as they came, and to confront the challenges that were facing children in our country. We knew that the pandemic, as soon as the lockdown went into place, that children were going to be suffering. They were shut down into schools and out of schools and cut off from their friends and support systems. And so we had to really think quickly about how we could advocate for children and advocate with them. And one of the ways that we did that was through a new program that we launched this year called the Young Canadians Parliament. It was designed to be a mechanism to enable children to work with their peers, to learn about their rights, to have a seat at the table with policymakers when decisions were being made about them. We got the funding in May. In the early days of the crisis, it had been designed to be a hybrid program of kids working digitally and then traveling to Ottawa to meet with their peers and with parliamentarians. But in the space of a month, we completely redesigned that program to be purely virtual and to give young people a platform to be working with their peers and with policymakers real time in the middle of a crisis to shape the decisions that were being made about their schools, about their food, the food and the need for food security, protection from violence, their mental health. And, you know, we really took the lead from the kids themselves. You know, it was very daunting for us as adults wanting to, you know, provide that support to kids, but they were the ones who really pushed us to move quickly, to think creatively, and to try new things. And the program evolved, you know, in a very exciting way over several months. We held our first event in June, and by, you know, starting with about 100 kids, and, you know, with our last event in November for National Child Day, we had over 3,000 children convened from across the country. And so it was, you know, clearly we were, you know, speaking, I guess, providing young people with a platform that they were desperate for. They wanted to be connected with their peers. They wanted to be exercising their leadership on decisions that were affecting their lives. And, you know, we simply were giving them the platform to be able to do that.
How important, especially at a time when we all were so disconnected in so many ways. I want to turn to Gideon, just going back to you know what we know, the pandemic has been such a particularly difficult time for arts and culture organizations. Can you talk a little bit more about how the National Theatre School has been able to reach new audiences this year? Not only in terms of reach, but I want to kind of dig at sort of how did you help to ensure that you're making the right decisions for NTS for the long run, not just in response to crisis mode?
Yeah, I think that was the real challenge, was to underpin the work and the adaptations that we made with all the right values that carried on the work that we've been doing over the past few years. So NTS is quite an old organization. This is our 6th anniversary. And we are principally a professional training program in a conservatory style model, which means really, really intensive training with a group of young artists. But we also run community programs in about 400 communities across the country with about 8,000 young people who participate in them. So these were artists who from one day to the next had lost everything they'd been working on for the previous 2-3 years. We knew we needed to kind of respond to that crisis that they were experiencing. We launched a couple of different things, and really it could be, I think we all went through this, but tracked along the phases of how the crisis unfolded. So right away, as things were happening on around March 12th or 13th of last year, our classes looked like they were getting shut down, and all of the festival shows from our youth program, so all the plays that young creators from across the country had made, were clearly never going to get performed. So we immediately wanted to respond and create a space for them to share their creation, to express themselves, and we launched a program called Art Apart, which was a micro granting program for young artists from across the country to share work digitally. And we partnered up with CBC and a couple of different private partners on that as well. And that was amazing. We seeded 100 different online creations across the country just as a response to this new reality we were living in. It was pretty amazing. And that served as a kind of underpinning then for what we would do over the coming months, which was to adapt our pedagogy to be able to be offered online. We then developed new health protocols, which allowed us to do our main courses back on campus, and we haven't had any community contagion since. We've also created a new online learning platform for our youth participants. And I would say that the thing that ties all of those together, kind of what I said in the innovation question, is a principle of care and a principle of service. How can we serve the folks who have been denied these opportunities, who had the wind cut out of their sails? How can we take care of them? And the school itself had been on a long journey of opening up to the world, of becoming a more diverse and representative institution for the country. And this possibility of creating care-driven ways of engaging with our stakeholders has really accelerated that conversation. It's pretty amazing.
I want to dig a little bit more deeply into that. I mean, I think that's really about being driven by your values, right? And that's what it comes down to. I also want to talk about one point that you mentioned around collaboration, and maybe I'll turn it to Ikem and then to Beck and to Karen. So Ikem, if we can assume that digital is the new sort of, you know, those are the table stakes, this is the new reality. What do you think innovation means kind of in a post-digital context? In other words, what is the future of innovation?
It's a good question. I think that the future of innovation has got to connect back to what Gideon was just talking about around care. I think if we are going to really be able to work together to move forward, we have to establish some common parameters and some things that we agree upon. That to me starts to look like caring. If you care enough about a person, a group, a community, or an idea, to learn about it, connect to it, value it enough to invest your time and effort into it, and to bring other people within your network along in order to build together. That's what collaboration means. We've as a species, we've been doing this since we started, right? The ability and the need for us to innovate together, to survive, to grow, to expand, to establish community and build culture and learn language. Nobody speaks a language alone, right? So you've got to be able to collaborate with other people in order to communicate and to build all of the things that make us who we are, to create art, to connect with multiple generations. That all requires us to innovate and think about new ways for us to collaborate. Now, when you bring it to the organizational level and to the institutions and the industry that we work in, we have been talking about collaboration for a very long time. We've mandated it, we've funded it, we've measured it. But I think now, with all that has happened, being able to actually speak about our survival and progress in very rudimentary ways that are dependent on us working together. I think there's an opportunity for us to rewrite a little bit of the software in terms of how we do this work, and how we actually measure what it is that matters to us as communities. That's where I see collaboration changing in a real way, and changing in ways that we can look back at this period and actually point to tangible changes that have happened in the ways that we work as a result of this.
Changes for the better, certainly. And I want to build on that a little bit and go to Beck and to Karen. Speaking about sort of responding to extraordinary circumstances, a year ago, Northern Compass won the Arctic Inspiration Prize for its work to help youth in Nunavut, NWT, and Yukon in their transitions towards higher learning and to work. Then, of course, the pandemic hit. How important have strategies like collaboration been to you and your team? Or are there other strategies you're embracing to help kind of future-proof your work?
Would you like me to start? Yeah. Okay. Well, collaboration is key to everything that we have done with Northern Youth Abroad and everything that we're doing with Northern Compass. First of all, we couldn't have gotten to receiving the Arctic Inspiration Prize without the many partners that we have in the North and across the business world. And so I think our main focus when we're talking about collaborating is the work that we do with the communities, because we serve youth from many remote communities in Northern Canada. And in order for us to help them in the way that we want to, getting through post-secondary, we have to understand, first of all, what the realities are in their communities and also what these individuals want. And if all of, then we decide where do you want to get from there, and then we look at who else is willing to help us help you get there, and if it really matters to these individuals and these businesses or these different organizations. And I think that's what Ikem was saying was, if our values match, then of course we're going to help each other achieve similar goals. And it's staying relevant in terms of, are we actually, is what we're doing reflecting what our audience wants from us?
I think too, it's been such an interesting year because I think in a lot of ways the pandemic has had a huge effect on Northern Canada. In a lot of ways, the virus has not. So some communities obviously have. Karen's home community is one that's had an outbreak, but many places haven't. But we've seen, just these assumptions about technology, the ability to have internet, broadband, all these sorts of things, travel. And so I think it was, for a moment, easy to be cynical. And we're not a cynical organization or cynical people. I think, crisis creates change. Innovation demands optimism because you have to look for that potential. And I think it's actually given us the opportunity to, I don't want to say demand, but to work with our partners to actually highlight some of these challenges that our youth do see. And so, you know, we were looking at transition supports, in a lot of cases, bringing Northerners south to go to post-secondary. We are now working on access programs taking place in the north, and that maybe would have been something 5-10 years down the road. And now March 15th, our first one will start. So I think that there actually is quite a bit of opportunity that's happened. But I think that, you know, we're very lucky to work in communities where relationships are key, and in remote flying communities where there isn't a lot of digital access. And so I think perhaps the post-digital is the combination of growing technology along with building true relationships.
It's an important reminder for the rest of us in all parts of the country, I think. And I love that notion that innovation demands optimism. I'm going to turn it to Sara, and then probably back to Beck and Karen, just to talk a little bit more about decision making. You know, as Sara, so much about being a leader anchors on strategic decision making. And this is a year that we've all had to make decisions quickly, sometimes with seismic shifts resulting in how we organize our teams, our work, and our culture. How you have pivoted could not have been entirely just reactionary. What factors or frameworks really help to enable some innovative decision making at Children First Canada?
Yeah, I think, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, one of the key ingredients that enabled us to move so quickly was that we were already virtual. And, you know, as an organization, we have already been hiring people based on their talent and their culture fit for the organization rather than based on location. So that was one thing that we went into the crisis with already. I think also from the very beginning, the organization has had an entrepreneurial spirit baked into the DNA of our organization. You know, the organization was born out of a sense that the state of childhood in Canada is not okay. Canada is ranked 30th out of 38 wealthy nations for children, and that was pre-pandemic. And so we know that we have big problems to solve. And so part of our culture as an organization is busting myths about what it's like to be a child in Canada. And that way of thinking that there are problems to be solved. We see a problem, but we're always looking for the solutions and looking at how do we make life better for all 8 million kids in our country, and particularly the most vulnerable. You know, I think another key component for this has just been having a continuous feedback loop. You know, I mentioned the Young Canadians Parliament program. We launched that in June, but you know, month after month, the program looked vastly different because we were constantly getting the feedback from our staff, but more importantly from the young people about what was working for them and what wasn't working and how could we improve upon it. And so every month it got bigger and better. And you know, the role of partnerships obviously was key to our success. You know, we are a very small organization. We only have 5 staff. So to be able to do the work that we do and have the impact that we need to have for all of kids in Canada, we have to work with others successfully. And so whether it's collaborations with CBC Kids News or through our Council of Champions, leveraging all of the leading children's charities and hospitals to speak with a united voice for kids, you know, really working with the sense that we can do more together than we can alone, I think is a really important part of the way that we work as an organization. And I think just continually being open to feedback and not seeing it as you know, criticism, but just as a way to continuously improve the way that we work. And last but not least, I think in a really important, you know, in a more personal way for me as a leader and for our staff is that, you know, your staff have a job to do, but they are also people with lives. And, you know, that's become even more, real for all of us in the middle of a pandemic. You know, most of my staff have children. We've had to juggle having kiddos at home while working in the middle of a crisis, the toll that's taken on our families. And so extending a lot of humor and a lot of grace to one another and realizing there are days when we can show up and give our very best, and there are days when we're just barely scraping by, and to have that sense of flexibility and support amongst your amongst your colleagues and as a team is so critical to getting through the good times and the bad times together.
And just having a bit of empathy for each other. I know we think about the empathy that I think we're driven by in terms of our work, but for our teams and our colleagues and ourselves, it's really critical. Mm-hmm. Beck and Karen, you touched on this a little bit, but what kind of shifts has Northern Youth Abroad had to make in terms of how you organize your team and your work? And do you think some of those changes are going to be lasting?
Yeah, what Sara said really resonates with me. I think from a boss perspective, showing grace and looking for opportunities. I equate our team to a sled dog team. We like to run. We all have 100-hour weeks in us, and I found 35-hour weeks at home was exhausting the team more than the 100-hour week. So we also work 7 days a week in the summer because of the nature of our normal business. That was not the case last year. So we worked 4-day weeks this year. I looked for ways to try to change things up. Some of our staff hadn't had a Friday off in July in 13 years. And so they had Fridays off in July. So it just being, I think they're being creative. We did actually come back to the office for a few months. We're back remote again. And that was a calculated risk, but it paid off in a really big way. I think that helped us. So I think we also decided that obviously within all of the parameters of what is public health policy and the law, that we would make decisions on what was going to work for our team. So we packed up before our last shutdown because we thought, okay, the risk is starting to increase a little, as opposed to coming in every day and wondering if we can come back tomorrow. We decided that we would make that decision as a team and make that work for us. So I think it was just really staying tuned into each other and just understanding energy levels are different. And that's the same with our participants. Mm-hmm. The youth that we work with, I think, were the most despondent. I've seen them in sort of March to May. And some of that was clearing out 9 p.m. on Thursday evenings to chat. And so I think it was just that from my perspective, trying to stay really in tune with those that we were working with.
Yep. And like Beck said, that's kind of the attitude that we have, not just in the office, but in, when we're working with the youth at our board meetings and everything. It's all of the decisions are made on consensus, but they're also made in supportive conversations that we have with each other. So whether it's Beck as the boss and her staff, or board of directors coming together on program decisions, or even if we're at camp with the youth and we're deciding what we're going to do that evening, and allowing and that's the idea of collaboration too, I think, is you're letting information to be constantly considered from all aspects, and it's not just a top-down sort of decision-making approach. And it's supportive, and we find it works well, and we find that our youth respond very well to it.
Definitely.
It's an important sort of entry point into the next topic, which is really around whose perspectives we're including at the table when it comes to decision making. So I want to talk a little bit about how the demand to innovate intersects with how we listen, learn, and engage more meaningfully with diverse communities. So maybe I'll ask Gideon to share a little bit about his experience with the NTS. Gideon, can you share how the National Theatre School is finding new ways to help share power, address systemic inequity, and perhaps blind spots that may have been baked into the organization's DNA along the road?
Yeah, it's such a complex and interesting question to ask in this context. I'll be fully transparent in talking a little bit about this. So the school had generally been on an arc, on a journey of talking about inclusion and diversity, wanting to become a more open organization for the past 5 or 6 years, and had been making some significant moves forward. But this summer, we received a series of open letters from former students of the school and some current students about the environment that the school had created and the ways in which Indigenous and Black and people of color students did not feel safe within our walls. And it was an amazing awakening for the school. And it couldn't have come at a better time, because we were in about the halfway point of this year. It was this summer, attached to the events with George Floyd's death. And we had evolved in the months prior, between March and, let's say, July, a much more open, transparent, caring, listening mode that allowed us for the first time to really hear what was being brought forward and not be defensive at all. And I think if we'd been in the general flow of our year, the outcome would have been completely different. So we were we were in many ways blessed to have this watershed moment that we could point to that really helped us reorient the way that we wanted to connect with the communities that the school was supposed to be serving. The work that we're doing now, I think, is just the beginning, but we very quickly put in place, first of all, new resources to make our students and our staff feel safe. That was the first thing. We knew that we couldn't proceed in the conversation if we didn't set up some parameters that would make sure that everybody knew that they were safe in bringing forward whatever it is that they wanted to bring forward. So we hired some new staff with some expertise. We paid for the health plan for all of our students so they could access even more psychological support services than we normally offered through the school. We put in place a school counselor. We reached out and have been working with a number of people in the kind of coordination of our EDI work. So we really invested very quickly in new resources to create a safe environment. And from there, we used some of the methodology that we discovered through COVID, which was really about empowering small groups of people to bring forward big ideas. We've used that to really good effect on the EDI front as well. So we struck a committee which had student representatives as well as staff and our board and members of the community and alumni. And we've been sort of plotting a path forward for the school to look at some major areas of concern. So we're doing a review of our pedagogy, of our policies and procedures, you know, a lot of the standard practice, but instead of it being driven by an external consultant that we might once dreamt of hiring who would give us all the answers, it's really being driven from within the school, using, again, this kind of COVID methodology that we've evolved of trusting the people around us to bring forward the most important things, listening to them, and then investing the resources required to bring those things forward. So it's been truly the most exciting period of my time at NTS has been engaging in these conversations. It had always been part of, you know, the strategic plan of the school, and now it's a daily reality. And I think that that is an incredible gift.
That's an amazing outcome, or it's an amazing process and journey that NTS is on. Ikem, looking to sort of thinking about your own experience when it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and your role in helping to build capacity and guide investments at the Ontario Trillium Foundation, how do you think our sector can really get better at asking and answering the question of who is not at the decision-making table and why? And then I'll sneak in a follow-up question to that. And it's how can we be asking this question consistently and honestly to help lead to greater innovation?
Well, I'm gonna try and answer those two together. I think to the first point, how the sector can get better at answering those questions is to actually begin asking and answering them, and asking and answering them in ways that are relentlessly open and ready to hear things we might not want to hear things that might be critical of the ways we have done things, the way we have told stories and entered into partnerships with and on behalf of communities who may not have had the opportunity to speak for themselves in those relationships. So I think that also comes down to the individual. In many cases, it's quite convenient to extrapolate out and say how the sector can. But I go back to how can I as an individual, how can we all as individuals, when we think about the decision-making tables that we are at as individuals, if you take a step back and think how you got there, what were the pathways and opportunities that were created for you to get there, and then think about how you can catalyze those pathways to exist for somebody else, for another community. What are the barriers that you see on your way to getting to that decision making table that might exist for somebody else, that you have the power to do something about, or to say something about, or amplify that barrier exists. That's sort of what we're building into the work that I'm doing now at Rideau Hall Foundation around our Catapult Canada program, that is all about building access pathways to learning, is built around this same concept of making sure that those whom decisions impact have a say in how we arrive at that decision. So, there's a lot of work that is happening around, boards of governance compositions and diversifying leadership. But I think at the core of it is really figuring out whose voices have we privileged in the past, why we have, and being willing to hear that we have made mistakes, learning from those, and quite frankly, doing exactly what it is that we ask our community members and partners to do. Is do something. If you learn something from it, measure it, tell the story of it, and we will assess how we invest in you again in the future as a result of that. If we turn that same lens back, that allows us to actually consistently and honestly answer that question by checking in with our community members, our community partners, and saying, have we, you entrusted us to do this work with you. Have we lived up to that expectation? Have we been open in how we're having our conversations, and making sure that decisions are being made in as collaborative and as equitable a manner as possible?
This has been such a rich conversation, and I think we can keep talking for hours with each of you about your regions and your work and your sectors. To kind of close off the formal piece of this, maybe I'll ask everyone to do a bit of a roundtable, and just we've all learned so much in this past year. Can I ask you just to share in a sentence or two how you can help to scale and share what you've learned, really about turning some shorter term incredible successes into longer term advantages? So I'll ask Karen and Beck to kick us off.
Oh, I have to go first. Well, I think if it really matters, you're going to find a way to do it. So don't worry about how you're going to get there. Just start.
I would say, yeah, just keep looking for what that opportunity is and chase it and follow it. And when it doesn't look obvious, look again.
Excellent. Sara?
I think, it's really staying focused on what is the problem you're trying to solve, and being open to new ways of solving that problem, not always tackling it because it's always been done that way. I mean, clearly if there's a problem, the old ways of doing things aren't working. And so I think just having that sense of openness and creativity, and being led by the people that have that problem. In our case, it's children. And so taking their advice and their counsel and recognizing that children are experts in their own lives. Of course, we have lots of research and data about the well-being of kids, but recognizing the experts for who they are, and giving them a voice and a seat at the table when decisions are being made about their lives.
Excellent. Ikem?
I think for me, I try to take a multi-generational approach in thinking about my work. And so the questions I ask myself are, well, my mom, if I were to explain to my mom what I did and the way I did things, will she be okay with it? And if I were to do the same for my 4-year-old daughters, would they be okay with it? If the answer to both of those is yes, then I'm okay.
The mom test. I like it. I think I'm going to introduce it. Gideon, to you.
Yeah, I think that what this period has really demonstrated for us is that care, love, empathy are the innovation we need right now. And that's how you scale, and that's how you change, but that it comes down essentially to taking care of those around us.
Care, love, and empathy that's a beautiful note to end this on. So again, thank you all so much for the conversation, and thanks for sharing more about your organizations and the realities and kind of what you've been through this past year. I'm still tired, as I was at the beginning, but I'm also very hopeful and very excited about the great work that you're doing across the country. So let's hear some questions from the audience.
Love the opportunity to be able to connect and share and to learn. Karen, Rebecca, Sara, Gideon, Ikem, and Teresa's brilliance and moderation. Listen, this is only the beginning, right? So understand that you may be at home in your pajamas, doing whatever you're doing, and still engaged here. Here's an opportunity for you to ask a question, right? There's been a lot of gems that have been dropped throughout this conversation. Here's a chance for you to have a gem that is specific to you with your name on it, right? So I invite you to engage in the chat. Pose a question, get your questions answered, and by these some of the brilliance and wisdom that is coming up, that's been demonstrated. Teresa, I'm going to kick it back over to you to continue in your brilliance in moderation.
Thanks, Orlando. Care, love, and empathy. I feel like I need a t-shirt and just wear it all the time. So thank you for that comment. Love seeing these questions come in. Let's go to the audience here. So, we didn't really actually talk a whole lot about, how we've been working with donors. So I want to talk a little bit about philanthropy and how innovation has played a role in how we're engaging with our supporters and how we have done that over the past year or so. So maybe I'll start with the question first for Sara and then ask Beck and Karen to weigh in. What innovative ways have you gone about thanking your donors in the past year? So Sara, how has that played out for Children First Canada?
Well, we went into this past year in a spirit of celebration. It was our 5th anniversary, so we were already looking for ways to thank our donors, those who took the chance on us 5 years ago and gave us seed funding to get going, and those who've joined us along the way. And so, it's been a year of thanking, not just because of the pandemic and the huge support that we've had throughout this past year, but the faithfulness of our donors who've been with us throughout this journey and who are helping us scale year over year. And so that's happened in many different ways. Often it's just in a very personal way because, it's a simple phone call. It's a checking in. We've, of course, done simple things like, a 5-year impact report to tell the story of what we've achieved in such a short period of time. But it's really the personal connections that have been most meaningful, whether it's with, with our individual donors or our corporate partners or government grants. Really checking in on a personal level with all the people who've supported us and expressing our gratitude and being able to talk about the impact, talk about the challenges we faced and invite them to continue with us on the journey.
And Beck and Karen, how about yourselves?
I think it's been a range of things. We tie-dyed 300 t-shirts and sent those to various donors and things, just, something different and a way to wear NYA proud, I guess, in bright colors. And I think one of the key things that we did this year was work with our funders to see how we could help, where maybe they were having trouble accessing community-based activities and things. So for instance, we led literacy camps this summer in some of the communities in the Northwest Territories to try and help ensure that kids were, using their language skills. We helped one of our funders get, I think, 300 backpacks to students in the communities that they served because we had alumni in the communities who were able to help with that.
I think I love the tie-dye. And I think about our experience at the Rideau Hall Foundation. And in many years, or in many ways rather, the past year moved both really, really quickly and really, really slowly. So I can think of a number of just conversations in my backyard that I had with a number of our supporters just to check in and see how they're doing and how that actually really furthered and developed the relationship. And it was such it was heartwarming, I think, certainly for me as the leader of the organization. I want to turn to another topic that we didn't really touch a lot on in the conversation, and that's around board and governance. And I'm wondering if you have any advice, and I'll ask this question first to Gideon and then to Ikem to follow up on. So in terms of working with boards, any advice in terms of, shifting thinking and kind of opening a board mindset to perhaps the need to think bigger or to change and adapt, or maybe just to show courage? So Gideon, thoughts on board relations? And no pressure, I am a director of the board of the NTS, but no pressure on that front.
I was going to say, full disclosure, you tell me. I think that what we learned a lot, and this would apply to boards and anybody else, is really that communication is key. That as much information as we can provide really helped first just to solidify a common understanding of the challenges that the organization was going through. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we met a lot, we talked a lot, we exchanged a lot. We tried to provide updates on an ongoing basis. But I think that the work of helping a board imagine what is possible really accelerated during this period. And as you'll know, we've been on a big journey at the school, expanding programs and looking at the ways we do things. But this crisis really demonstrated that we didn't have to respond
in an emergency measure, we could build, we could ride momentum, we could push through what we were already building together, and that we didn't only have to take an approach of caution or fiduciary anxiety, that we could actually sort of take this opportunity to build something new for the school. And that was my favorite part of the conversation with the board this summer, was presenting that actually we're going to do something here, and there's an opportunity here as much as there is a risk or anxiety about what's coming next.
I think that's right. And as a director on NTS, I can say that it was such a valuable journey to have gone on, and it felt like we were part of what the NTS and what the school was really grappling with. Ikem, how about you? Any thoughts in terms of how we can better work with boards on kind of adapting thinking and needing to make those pivots?
I think the central thing is to really have those conversations and to have them honestly and earnestly. I think it was a novelist, Thomas King, who said that I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but when you've heard the story, you can no longer say that if only you had known, you would have done something differently in the future. So if we have these conversations very consistently and honestly with our boards about how we can run organizations, relate with community in a different way, given the context that we're in right now, it eliminates the opportunity and the need for us to look back with regret, or look back in retrospective and say, if only we knew, we would have done this differently. There's an open invitation now to continue to have those conversations at a person-to-person level and connect with each other and really dig in to why the purpose of the organization and what change you're actually trying to create in community. I think that is a very powerful way to enter into those relationships and make change going forward.
I think that's right. And it is one, although, yes, the year has been very difficult, it has been a year that has opened up these moments for really personal connection and conversation. I'm going to turn to Sara for the next question. I'm sort of laughing at it because I would know my response. So Sara, do you feel that the children you work with took to the digital shift more quickly than a typical adult audience might have? And I laugh because I feel like my 9-year-old is my at-home tech support in this work from home.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, Teresa. I have a 10-year-old, and he's far more advanced with technology than I am, and that's a challenge as a parent, always staying a couple of steps ahead of them for all kinds of reasons. But yes, absolutely, the children and youth in our organization have taught us a lot. Thinking back to the Young Canadians Parliament and really learning from them and just having that humility on our part as adults. We're used to being the experts, but really challenging those power dynamics and letting the children and youth teach us and letting them guide us and being open to their critical feedback and how to improve. So yes, 100%, they are leading the way when it comes to the use of digital technology, but also recognizing that we as adults have responsibilities around how to support them to do that safely. We all know the risks around online exploitation and some of the huge risks that our young people are facing right now during the pandemic, because they're spending a lot more time online, often without parents or other supervision. So there are huge benefits to their digital skills, but also huge risks. And so we're having to weigh that in balance and learn from them, but also provide the support that we as adults need to do.
I'm going to turn the next question to Ikem, and then maybe to Beck and to Karen. And to get, I'm going to turn it to everyone, actually. Let's do a roundtable, because I think this is probably the last question. We're in a build back better kind of moment. How can we all become more active and vocal champions of equity and inclusion? And I'm thinking about that not only in terms of our organizations, but our broader sector, and then actually even thinking more broadly about the public policy kind of realm. So Ikem, what are some thoughts on that?
My thinking is that if we are to look back at the way things were before and take an honest and critical look at it, we will recognize that they didn't always work. They didn't always work for everybody. Even when they worked at the expense of others sometimes. So here's an opportunity to build back in a way that is way more inclusive, way more equitable, and way more just. It's not going to be good enough for us to get back to before and get back to normal or whatever that is, because I mean, I think, 18 months ago, we would have been having this conversation and the focus would have been more around the inequities that exist as opposed to building back. So I don't think we want to build back to a point where the inequities were what they were. I think we've got an opportunity to again, connect at that individual level and be really introspective about, I think in our earlier comment, I talked about the mom test. You referred to it as a mom test, Teresa. If I'm able to, in looking back at what we've done, actually be able to say to my mom, hey, this is what I did, and she'd be okay with it. And to be able to say to my little ones, this is what I did, and they're okay with it. That's the test for me. And if all of us can actually apply that kind of litmus test to the work that we do at a personal, community, and institutional level, I think we'll be okay.
Beck and Karen, any thoughts on how we build back better in a way that is much more inclusive?
I think the pandemic has really taught all of us that each of us have a big part to play in ensuring that everyone has equitable access to technology. And so that's not just computers and iPads that we need right now to get on Zoom and things, but for our youth in Nunavut and small communities in the Northwest Territories, fair and reasonably priced internet access. So that's a big limitation for our youth right now. And it's been a challenge for them when they're attending college over Zoom classes. And I'm sure there are many other populations across our country who are experiencing challenges in that area, and probably clients that each of our organizations serve, those of us on this panel. So I think that's something that is important. For us, I think in April or even late in March, right after the pandemic really started, was Northern Compass took a shift from traveling to hubs and then started supporting youth who might need resources like that and doing small one-time grants and things like that. So there's definitely an opportunity for all of us. And I think we now realize the importance of that specific access to technology.
Mm-hmm. It's the new, that is the level playing field that we need to build towards. Sara, thoughts from your perspective in terms of building back better in a way that is radically more inclusive than it has been in the past?
Well, I think, a really important part of building back better involves, investing in our children and youth. A decade ago, Canada was a world leader for children's well-being. We were ranked 10th. Now we're ranked 30th. And clearly our kids are not all right. And I think there has been a national awakening because so many of us have witnessed the challenges our kids have faced during the pandemic around their mental health, the online bullying, like so many of the things that kids are now having to struggle with. And so whatever plans Canada has for an economic recovery, social recovery, need to put children and youth at the center.
Thanks. And Gideon, last word to you. We're over time, but I want to hear what you have to say just briefly on building back better.
Well, I'll add to love, care, and empathy is service. And just remembering that our organizations are funded by people and tax dollars and our communities, and that we have an obligation to serve them in as fair and equitable a manner as possible. And so if you have love, care, and empathy, that leads to service.
There is room for service on the t-shirt. So thank you. Thank you all. We could keep going for a long, long time. And I thank you for your questions in the audience. But I'll turn it back to you, Orlando. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here.